2022 is quickly approaching. In fact, we only have a couple of days left of 2021, which is quite honestly insane to think about. It feels like it was just a couple of weeks ago that we were entering the pandemic. It was March of 2020 and people were getting sent home to work. To think that that happened nearly 2 years ago is quite honestly mind-blowing. But as we head into 2022 and as we close out 2021, it is of course a time of reflection to think about some of the things you did right and of course some of the things you did wrong as well. And then today we're going to be talking about just that. And I'm going to be breaking down my biggest mistake with my Turo fleet in 2021. In this video, I'm going to be breaking down what that mistake was, why I think it was a mistake, what I could have done differently, and of course how you can learn from this so that you don't make the same mistake as well. So without further ado, let's dig in. 2021 was a pretty big year. I started a second YouTube channel. I continued this YouTube channel. I bought an RV. I continued building out a camper van. My fiance quit his job to work with our business full time. There has been a lot going on, but as you can of course probably expect, we've also made a lot of mistakes over the last couple of months. But whenever I'm trying to evaluate and reflect on what that biggest mistake was, what my single worst decision I made in 2021 was, there is one thing that sticks out more than others. But before we dig into what that mistake was, and of course how you can avoid making the exact same one, if you guys could do me a huge favor and if you could hit the like button for the YouTube algorithm. This helps my channel grow because it helps let YouTube know that you guys are enjoying my content, and thus YouTube pushes my content out to a broader audience. So if you guys could do that, I would greatly appreciate it. Now 2021 was really the year of doubling down on our car sharing fleet. You see, in June of this year, my fiance and business partner HP quit his job in order to concentrate on our car sharing fleet full time. This was honestly probably our best decision of 2021, and it was something that I am so happy that we did. But one of the ways that we were able to justify this decision and thus justify losing HP's income source was doubling down on our car sharing fleet and trying to grow our fleet as much as possible. The goal at the beginning of the year was to try to get to 20 cars, and that didn't end up happening, but we got pretty dang close. We also diversified in the platforms that we joined. We experimented with Getaround, we're now on Outdoorsy, and of course we're also on Turo as well. But of all of the changes, all of the adjustments, all of the additions that we've made to our car sharing fleet over the last year, there is one decision that we've made that sticks out more than others as one of our biggest mistakes of 2021, and that is the type of car that we chose to experiment with on Getaround. Now, over the last 6 months or so, I've made a number of videos talking about Getaround and how it compares to Turo, which one is better, how they're different, what you can do if you want to join Getaround. I've really talked about this in a lot of detail in other videos, so I will include a few links down in the description below. But let me just give you a brief summary right here to get you up to speed. You see, Getaround is a competitor to Turo. They really are very, very similar in theory, but in execution, they're quite a bit different. With Turo, they target renters that are on vacation or people who are commuting for work or people that are in town for work, really people that need a car to get anywhere they need to go. Whereas Getaround is very different in who they target. They target gig workers specifically. So Getaround is a place where people can go to rent a car if they need a vehicle in order to drive for Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, things like that. Additionally is the passivity of the business model. Getaround is something that is considered to be really passive. You only have to check in cars once a week, while Turo is quite a bit more time intensive because of the fact you have to check in cars once every 24 hours. There are a lot of other things that I could say, pros, cons, details, differences, things like that, but I'll just leave it to that for the sake of trying not to be redundant. But again, if you want to learn more about Getaround, I will include some links down in the description below. But the role that Getaround plays in my biggest mistake of 2021 is an important one. You see, over the summer, I was contacted by a representative of Getaround that asked me if I would be interested in joining the platform. And one of the big selling points of Getaround was the fact that they allowed older vehicles. While Turo requires cars that are only 130,000 miles or less and 12 years or newer, Getaround allows cars that are quite a bit older and quite a bit more high mileage. With Getaround, you can have a car that is a 2007 or newer with 200,000 miles or less. This is something that is really attractive, especially in today's car market where cars are incredibly expensive. That, paired with the passivity aspect of Getaround, which is quite a bit more passive than Turo, got me really curious on the platform, and I told this representative that I would buy a couple of cars to list on Getaround to see how they would do. You see, Getaround has quite a different structure than Turo in the sense of how they've expanded throughout the United States and other parts of the world. While Turo has really gone from country to country, Getaround has gone from market to market. So up until this summer, Getaround actually wasn't even offered in my area, which is the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And the reason why this representative contacted me was because Getaround was moving into the DFW area and they needed new hosts to support the market. I was, of course, interested in this because I was interested in learning about Getaround and also being one of the first hosts to join the Getaround platform in my area. So within a couple of days of being contacted by this representative, I purchased my first Getaround car, and that was a 2009 Scion with 180,000 miles. My thought process with getting this car was that yes, it was older and higher mileage, but because of the fact that it was basically a Toyota, because Scion and Toyota are essentially the same car, it would be a good sound investment because of the maintenance and reliability that Toyota brings. Additionally, I had to get a car that had automatic locks and windows because that is one of the requirements of Getaround, which meant that I couldn't go for an older base model Yaris, which oftentimes have manual locks and windows. Because of this, I decided to go with the Scion XD because I thought that it would check all of the boxes nicely. Now, don't get me wrong, this Scion XD has been a really good car. In fact, I still own it to this day. It's clean, it's spacious, it drives nice, and it gets great gas mileage. But the one thing that I didn't think about was what I would do with this Scion if things with Getaround didn't work out. In fact, I didn't think about this because it never crossed my mind that Getaround wouldn't work out. But unfortunately, that's exactly what ended up happening, and I ended up leaving the Getaround platform just about a month ago after Thanksgiving. You see, in theory, Getaround checked all of the boxes. I loved the passivity that the platform offered. I loved the ability to buy older cars. I loved the ability to have a more hands-off approach, which is something that Turo simply doesn't offer. But the one thing that I didn't think about was the fact that Getaround was a new platform, and what was I going to do if I didn't have enough renters to rent my car? And this is unfortunately something that ended up happening. And that brings us to my biggest mistake of 2021, which is the Scion XD that I purchased for Getaround. And I consider this to be my worst purchase of the year, and there are a few reasons why. Number one is the fact that this is a 2009 with 180,000 miles. This car meets the requirement of Getaround, but it does not meet the requirements of Turo. If I was smarter and if I would have thought about it, I really should have bought a car that met both the requirements of Turo and Getaround. And the reason why I didn't think about this is because, to be honest, it never crossed my mind that Getaround wouldn't work out. I just assumed it would work just as well as Turo and that I would be in a position to grow a Getaround fleet just as I've grown a Turo fleet. But ultimately, that isn't what happened, and now I have a car that doesn't qualify for Turo and isn't on Getaround, and now I'm stuck with a vehicle that I have to sell. Even though Turo has an exclusivity clause and you can't rent a car on Turo and Getaround at the same time, I wish that I would have bought a car that would have qualified for Turo and Getaround. That way, if Getaround didn't work out, I could delist it from the Getaround platform and instead list it out on Turo, rather than having to sell a car that I purchased only 7 months ago. That was mistake number one. But mistake number two was the price that I paid for this car. To be honest, I overpaid for this vehicle, and I think it ultimately comes down to the fact that I was impatient and I was excited to join the Getaround platform. I paid $5,500 for this car, which, to be honest, is way too high. This car is old, it's high mileage, it has sun fading marks all over the paint, it has exterior damage. It's a solid car, but is it $5,500 worth? Probably not. In fact, I've purchased a number of other cars for $5,500 or less that are significantly nicer than this Scion, and I wish that I would have been a bit more patient and found a car that was better for a lower price. I think that ultimately the reason why I overpaid was because I was eager to join the Getaround platform and I wanted to find a car as soon as possible. Because of this, a lot of the processes and procedures that I typically follow when purchasing a new car simply fell through the cracks, and as a result, I ended up buying a car that was too high of a price. I've spoken a lot on this channel as well as on my vlog channel the importance of buying cars below market value, because of the fact that if you buy a car below market value, you not only can make money whenever you are renting out the car, but you can also make money when you either sell the car or when the car gets totaled. But because of the fact that I think I probably paid above market value for this vehicle, I am most likely going to end up losing money on the sale of this car, which is something that I never want to do. Ultimately, when it comes down to the mistake of Getaround as well as this Scion, I think that it was caused by the fact that I didn't take a lot of the pieces of advice that I talk about every single week on this channel. I was very eager about joining Getaround, and I kind of blindly followed the advice and information that the sales rep told me, and I didn't do any of my own due diligence. And because of that, I kind of went in blind to this new platform without having any sort of backup plan in place. Additionally, I was so excited to join and I was so eager to buy a new car that I found one that was overpriced, and thus I paid an overprice for it. As a result, I most likely will end up sitting on a car for a couple of months that will generate no revenue while it's being sold. I will end up probably losing money with the sale of this car, and it will end up taking quite a lot of time, energy, and effort to get this car out of my life. With it being said, you guys, the reason why I wanted to make this video was because I think it's very important to cover both the positives and the negatives of your entrepreneurial journey. I'm a big proponent of talking about the money that I make on Turo when I buy cars below market value, how much I saved, how much I made, and all of the facts and figures. But whenever it comes to losing money, it's as equally as important to talk about these mistakes as well. And when it comes to this Scion as well as Getaround, I definitely made mistakes that I think that all of you could learn from. The other thing I would like to note is that I'm not trying to dog on Getaround specifically. I think that Getaround's a really cool platform, and I think that there's a time and place for that platform. In fact, I know of many hosts that are on Getaround and make a ton of money renting cars with them. But in my case specifically, I think that it was because they're new to the Dallas area, they brought on too many hosts, and they simply oversaturated the market, and they don't have enough renters to rent the cars that are listed. Because of that, a lot of hosts have cars that simply aren't getting rented out. That is certainly what happened to me. So this isn't a reflection of Getaround specifically, it's just a reflection of my experience in the Dallas area. But before you sign off, I also would like to remind you that I recently started a Patreon page. This page is $9 a month, and it's basically going to be a place where you can find data-driven facts, figures, and information regarding how to grow your Turo fleet. So we'll be doing market breakdowns, we'll be doing vehicle breakdowns, we'll be doing Q&As, live streams, all of that type of stuff. So if you guys are interested in checking that out, I will include a link down in the description below. Like always, if you have any questions, comments, if you have anything to add, I would love to hear it, so make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit the notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.